Wow, bright lights.
I can see that everyone came back this morning. That's good.
Great. I didn't realize that writing this book, I'd be in front of all these people and these lights. So,
Did you realize that customer success teams have sense of humor?
yeah. So I'm told. Well, so Guy, it was a great experience collaborating with you on this book. I learned a lot. Obviously, the industry is changing, the space is changing a great deal. One of the things that you mentioned early on in the process was, look, I want to do the how. You said there's been enough why, and that's why we're sort of doing this. I thought that was kind of an interesting insight on why you wanted to do the book, and I thought maybe you could tell us a little about that.
Yeah, I kind of alluded to that a little bit in the keynote yesterday, that when I ran engineering, I didn't have experience before that running engineering teams. And I wanted to understand how to do it. And there was a book that really helped me figure out what's the manual, right? How do I need to think about this? And this book started with the concept first. And I like concepts because once you get the principle, then the day-to-day you can do the implementation, the adaptability of whatever you need to do on a day-to-day basis, as long as you understand what is the goal and how does this machine work. So that's the purpose of this book. Similar, I'm hoping that we've got this, but similar concept, principle, and really practical guides and examples of how to actually implement customer success programs.
Yeah, we had some fun times going through figuring out what the right metaphor was, right, to explain this. We actually started out with a machine, and the original title was the Customer Success Machine, but then we moved to this metaphor. And so maybe you could talk a little bit about what that transition was about and why.
I don't know, you told me that doesn't work.
Yeah, well, I certainly thought that it made sense when you suggested it, but you're in the middle of this stuff and you had strong opinions about it.
Yeah, so I think this was like few things happened in the same week. I was sitting with our product team to brainstorm on some kind of new program features in the product, and we were trying to kind of figure out how we merge things together, and we had too many metaphors. We just had too many, and it was too complex. And yes, we thought initially the idea was there's a sales and marketing machine. Everyone talks about this, so let's do a customer success machine, the same model. But this didn't have the I would say the insight that customer success is different. And I think I guess the nuts of it is that it's the recurrence nature of this business. Mm-hmm. And in a recurring nature of a business, you need to think about what does it mean and how you run. And I think, and I mentioned this again yesterday. I don't know how I missed that because I did grow up in a farm. So that was all my childhood was farming and trees and seasons and harvesting and so forth. Yeah. I guess it took me 20 years to remember my roots, right?
The other thing we talked about at some point was, you may not know this, but Guy used to command a tank battalion. And the question was whether we can somehow work the tank battalion into customer success.
Kill the customer,
yeah. One of the things that I was sort of really struck by as we were going through this process is that there isn't a lot of industry-wide consensus on a lot of the sort of terms that are used. And do you feel that there are any terms in particular that are misunderstood or which kind of really need the whole industry to agree on what they mean?
I think there's lots of bits and pieces that people get in customer success, like the difference between reactive and proactive, right? People realize that the reactive model just doesn't work, right? I think farm don't hunt. I don't think we've invented the farming metaphor. It has been around even before. We just put some more content into that. I think people do realize that there's something in data and this new architecture of businesses where you distribute your product over the web and the customer is kind of semi-remote and uses the digital interaction with you. And people also realize the friction or the lack of friction in onboarding and offboarding and all that. And so where do you start? Is it about proactive? Is it about data? Is it about, so So I think people get all that. What I think is hard, or at least was hard before the book, was putting everything together, right? And kind of explaining why things are the way they are, why data is so important, and you know, why the metaphor is portfolio management and not something else.
One of the, we talk a lot in the book about these plays, right? Success plays and sort of the things that the customer success team needs to do in order to react to certain triggers in the environment. And we started off by sort of categorizing everything as a response to a trigger, but we ended up then distinguishing between ongoing programs and things that you need to do to maintain a rhythm and cadence, and then things that happen as a response to a trigger. Maybe you could talk a little bit about how, in your experience, it's important to distinguish between these things and what some best practices are.
Yeah, so I think I kind of mentioned this. Being proactive is basically event-driven, right? To some extent, right? Being able to see the early signals of a customer and then respond to them before on the timing that you can actually impact, right? But at the same time, kind of I looked at the way we run our customer success organization. There are things that we want to make sure are happening anyway, right? Even if the customer is not, there's a sign of distress, we still want to run programs around feature adoption. And we want to influence, and kind of my latest, 2015 for me was a lot of using simple terminology for customer success, getting away from the mumbo jumbo of the market of customer success. Just talk about what are the things that people do. And what I came up with is proactively impacting lifetime value, right? And the proactive thing is not just responding, it's also being able to say something like, I want to make sure that the feature that we're releasing today is going to be adopted by 50% of the customers within the next 3 months, and to build a program around that. And so the point is that there are things that you do because there are changes within the customer behavior, right? Simplify the term. And there are things that you do just to make sure that there's an ongoing energy that goes into the customer engagement. And this ongoing energy, we call this success programs, and event-driven triggers, there are success plays, and this is how you merge them together.
Yeah. One of the things that you mentioned while we were writing the book that I thought was very interesting is that people focus a lot on the onboarding portion of the customer life cycle, and then on the portion right at the end of a cycle, which is renewal and upsell and so on. But that most of the time the customer actually spends in what we call the growing phase, and that's where sort of the potential to differentiate yourself from a customer success standpoint comes. Maybe you could talk a little bit about sort of what's important about that growing phase and what we can be doing more in that phase.
Yeah, so what we're talking about is, if you think about this, right, let's say an annual contract, 30 days of onboarding and maybe 30 days of renewal process. So you have 60 days out of 365 days a year. So 300 days, it's growing. And on second year, there's no onboarding anymore, so it's 330 days where the customer is growing, and third year is another 330 days and so forth. So most of the time, the customer is in this state where they're not onboarding and they're not up for renewal, immediate renewal. And so what do, right? You have to have some sort of a play in order to impact that, right? This is a time that the customer is growing, so you need to nurture them. And this nurturing is, the subset of all the programs and all the success plays that you put in place in order, and we call this the engagement model, right? This is, and when you do the math on those timing, it sounds it does sound, when you put this on a chart, you see that most of the time the customer has no program around them.
Yep.
And so if you want to be proactive, you probably should do something there too.
Yeah, there's a sort of insight there, which is the customers that you're not hearing from because you're not engaging with them in those time frames are the ones where you can be adding kind of a lot of value. Out of sight shouldn't be out of mind. In the book, we talked a lot about how the changed business model of sort of subscription revenue has affected so much of what we do in customer success. You mentioned the other day that the customer engagement model also has changed, and I thought that was an interesting insight. And when we talk about it a little bit in the book, maybe you could touch on that.
Yeah. So the way I'm seeing this right now, and I wasn't the first one to say that every business is a tech business or every industry is software industry. So I think there's a new architecture of businesses. The business model is recurring revenue, whether it's subscription, pay as you go, lifetime value business. It doesn't matter what is the actual monetization, but this. And the second thing, if you really think about it, is you log into every business. There's almost no business in the world right now that you don't log into. You log into your coffee because you have an app for Starbucks or something else. You log into your thermostat because people have Nests in their houses, and you log into your business applications, right? Google Apps, Microsoft, Office 365, whatever. You log into everything. So this login, what does it really mean? It means that part of the engagement is digital. It could be the entire engagement is digital, but at least part of the engagement is digital. The data is stored on the cloud, and the business model is recurring revenue, which means that you optimize for the lifetime value. So it seems to me that the ultimate solution here is to, realize that this is the new engagement and solve it within this realm, which basically means your customer have a very simple way to engage with you through digital channels. There's data that is really, really meaningful that could be very insightful for companies to know more about their customers in order to maximize your ability to extend their lifetime value by providing more value to them, by making sure that they're getting the value by being proactive about this. And I think more and more, obviously a lot of folks in the audience here realize this already and are doing the necessary things in order to implement that. But I don't think it's just tech, right? I'm sure that a lot of the audience here are tech companies, but it's not just software as a service companies, because Starbucks knows so much about me and my drinking habits and so forth. Coffee drinking habits and. And,
they probably do, actually.
Yeah, but right now they don't do anything interesting with that, and that's just a shame. And I'm sure that the companies that we want to have an edge will take advantage of that, and will provide more value to their customers, and innovate through that, and be very successful.
One of the things that we spent a fair amount of time on is how do we make this actionable, and. We spent a lot of time actually kind of creating this guide for the first-time VP and a sort of 30, 60, 90-day plan, and because this comes up for you a lot, as people asking you, what do I do now? What do you think are the most important challenges in those first sort of 3 time frames for a new customer success professional?
Yeah, so without getting too much into the details, I think that one of the conversation I had with one of our sales leaders in the last year was that she was telling me that she talks to a lot of prospects, and they all tell her, yeah, we really like it, but we first need to get our data in order, and then we need to do this, and then we need to do that. And I was thinking to myself, how can they afford doing that, right? Because when you hire a VP of sales, first question is, what's my goal for this year? And then he comes back to you, tells you, this is what I need, these are the resources that I need, and they go out and sell. This is what they do, right? There's no, I first need to get systems in place. You get your systems, you do whatever you have to do, but you have a number to meet. So what I learned by that is that customer success must have a number in order to be proactive. So this is why I'm saying customer success is not about customer love, it's a business. So you have a number, you get, as a VP of customer success, you need to think, okay, the CEO gave me $10 million of ARR at the beginning of the year, and my goal is to bring back 120% of that at the end of the year, out of these customers, not the new ones that are coming, right? And by setting the business goal, a lot of good things are happening. First, there's alignment. Second, you are revenue generating function now, and not just feel good type of role. And wherever time there's to cut costs, this is the easiest place to go. And also creates a very strong alignment around the organization. So the first thing that people need to do after they understand their team and the talent and so forth, is understand what's their business goal and what is the path that they need to build in order to meet this business goal quickly. Usually it goes into look at your journey, where's the biggest drop off. If it's onboarding, let's improve the onboarding program. If it's lack of adoption, what are we going to do about adoption, and so forth, right? Every business is a little bit different, but analyzing that and then just solving for that one by one creates the highest return faster for the organization, and also creates an optimization over time.
Yep. I guess more on a personal note. So, as you look back on the process of writing the book, kind of what were the highs and the lows, and maybe some of the insights that you got by doing it?
Yeah, so my purpose of this book is I feel that through the years, Tatango has created a lot of content around best practices and so forth, but we created too much content, and it was a little bit disjointed, and many geological generation of the company were telling the story differently. So we're trying to kind of organize all these ideas into something which is extremely simple. I think obviously the review cycles with the team in which they've kind of seen the first drafts and kind of commented, and some friends from the audience here that have helped in kind of giving us feedback was very, very effective. I liked it. The co-author was...
So it might be time for sort of looking into the future a little bit. And we, as we went through the process, we said, okay, there's certain things that we're going to work on and so on. If you look at, what's going to come in the second edition, sort of, what do you see developing in customer success over the next couple of years that'll form kind of the basis for the next
So I think in this, I've been able to be in some of the breakout session yesterday. I think that and I've heard this from other attendees. I think the conversations are maturing around customer success. People are actually doing it, which means that they are learning, and these learnings could be applied to further enhancements. I think in the first few years of this conference, we were talking about, you need to go back to your company and sell to your boss customer success, right? That's basically was the theme, right? Maybe it wasn't intentional, but there was not a lot of actual learning that people actually implemented. I think now people are actually doing this, and we've seen a huge turnover in customer success leaders in the last 12 months. A lot of people kind of switched jobs, or a lot of people were let go, which I think is also a sign of maturity, because now it's not just, the CEO is not just thinking that I have a customer success leader in place. I want a customer success leader that delivers on the numbers. So there's way more accountability right now on customer success, which creates better innovation, better, best practices, things that work or not. And I'm sure that in the next 12 months, 18 months, we will see so much more ideas coming from people implementing customer success that could be extended version of the book in the next edition, if we're going to do a next edition.
Yeah.
Let's get this one first.
Yeah. So
you want to open this for
I was going to say, so just one last question. You originally said you kind of had an experience with a book about agile and sort of the engineering space, and maybe you could relate that to the hopes that you have for this book. So what do you hope this book will be, and what role will it play sort of in the industry?
So I think I have early indication already, because I was drinking coffee downstairs in the morning, and some folks that came in the train shared with me that they spent some time reading the book on the train last night. So the initial feedback is pretty good. But what they mainly said, I need another copy to bring this to my boss, and I want them to read that too. So if you need that, let me know. But I'm hoping that this is going to be the catalyst to professionalize customer success further, right? So that it's not just branding. Customer success is cool. I'm changing my title I'm support of customer success to get a 20% increase in my salary. I hope this is not the point anymore. I hope this is going to be really driving the outcomes of customer success, which is proactively impacting lifetime value.
Great. Awesome. I think we've got some mics on the sides. Are there any questions from the audience? We've set aside a couple of minutes. If nothing else, you've got Guy here to answer questions for you. Yes, please. Do we have mics set up?
Yeah, it's there. One
Yeah,
there.
just step
and
to the
one there.
microphone off to your left there.
That's cool.
Thanks very much for sharing your book with all of us. That is very generous of you. In terms of what's coming up in the coming years, I was wondering if you had any thoughts about one particular topic, and that's predictive analytics, as a way of finding out before even the customer knows that they're going to decamp.
Yeah, so that's actually a very good topic, because once we start realizing that there's a lot of data on the digital channel that can be used to understand customers, then the immediate next question is, okay, so tell me in advance which customers are going to cancel. And we touched this on the book in two things. I've kind of introduced to you yesterday the portfolio scorecard, which is kind of a model which you can see where are the areas that need improvement. Another point that we touch in the book is that you could use predictive analytics as a driver to a lot of the activities that you do if you are mature enough to know if you know what are the telling signals of customers, canceling or something like that, you can deal with that ahead of time. I think that there have been several attempts in the customer success space specifically on predictive analytics that didn't go that well. And I think the reason is the models were too simplistic, and I think they were trying to predict the obvious. I can tell you that the customer that is not engaging with you and is not using your service is going to cancel once they see the request on the credit card or when they're up for renewal. So I think the expectation is that predictive analytics is going to be way smarter, not just about who's going to cancel. It's going to be also, and what is the right next step with this customer, and when is the right next step. And in order to do that, then the data model needs to include the customer, what the customer does, and what the team is doing, what the company is doing, and what is the outcome. And it needs to have enough data points and over time, and also to look across company boundaries, compare companies one to the other. And this is where I believe predictive analytics is going to give a lot of value into customer success model. I'm a big believer in predictive analytics. I'm a big believer in data in general, but I think in this specific case, I would say let's walk first and then run, because I think the walking is something that we're still not doing that well. So that's my 2 cents on that.
Yeah, I mean, if anything, in my last book, which was also about sort of the effects of having very low friction business environments, even in sales, it just seems like organizations are having a hard enough time catching up with the data that's coming in as it stands and configuring themselves to respond to this stuff, that the next step around predictive analytics feels like, it takes a full step forward.
Yeah, so to me, predictive analytics is, the experience of predictive analytics needs to be something like, do you want to connect with this person on LinkedIn, right? Something like that. It shouldn't be more complicated than that, right? This customer, you may want to send this email to this customer right now, and here's the subject, and here's the text, and so forth. I don't think the experience needs to be way more complicated with that. The machinery, the underlying machinery needs to be very, very powerful in order to recommend the right recommendations, but I don't think it needs to be. Customer success should not be, an analyst position.
Sure. Well, one of the things I was struck by, actually, even as we went through the book, is that we described this framework for prioritizing all of these tasks. And I mean, the point of the scorecard is to figure out, okay, what are all these things worth and how do you prioritize them? But to do that manually is just, honestly, it's not possible given the size of the matrix.
Exactly. And I think what we've also discovered in the book, if we look at what are the activities that the customer success managers themselves do, the single activities are actually very straightforward and simple. Yep. They train, they review, they assist, they solve problems for customers. It's not like what they do is extremely complicated, is when they do it and what's the context for that and how do they make sure that they do it with the right customers at the right timing in order to maximize the yield. This is where it becomes very, very, this is where the sophistication lies.
Yeah, it's clearly hard. Yeah, it's clearly hard. Great. Are there any other questions from people in the audience?
I think we're out of time. So.
All right.
There is. Go ahead.
Last question.
You were running so nicely. We're not gonna.
Cool, thank you. So Guy, yesterday in your presentation you mentioned the advantages of using portfolio management to manage your customers versus the pipeline. So, and based off conversations I've had yesterday, it looks like some folks are still very much using the pipeline. Can you talk to the advantages of using portfolio? What were some of the things you had in mind for those of us who hadn't had a chance to read the book yet?
Yeah, so I'm not going to answer because you have to read the book. No. I would say two things. One is, I think pipeline management, and you mentioned this before, Fernando, that people they understand onboarding and they understand the renewal pipeline. And everything in between is it's a new thing. So like everything which is new, it requires some sort of adaptation and change, and it takes some time to get to that. Portfolio management, I mentioned the reason why it's not very effective, because by the time customer is being asked with a renewal decision, they've already made the decision pretty much. So your ability to impact that is very, very limited. So if your goal is to impact renewals, then you need to make sure that, so that it's not working, or it's not working that well. I mean, and Mark Roberge said this on the stage yesterday as well. So portfolio management is a way to break your customer base into stages, and every stage has a different set of activities associated with that. Onboarding customers being, you work on onboarding them, and growing customers, which is not onboarding and not renewing, you work to nurture them, and the renewal customers or in renewal customers, you work to renew them. So I'm not saying that you don't do it, but you have to have the entire range of activities, and the portfolio view allows you to do two things. One is to distribute the customers across. One of the challenges in scaling customer success is how do you assign customers to CSMs or to teams or whatever. So if you do this by the count, by the number of customers, it may become very expensive and you will not make it efficient. If you do it by the value, then it's very scalable, because you're saying every CSM owns $2 million of recurring revenue business. Now, if the contract value is low, it means a lot of customers, so the engagement model needs to be efficient and automatic and computer driven and so forth. If it's less, the contract is higher, then it's less customers, you may have more human interaction in that. So that's one thing, it scales very well. The secondly, which is what Fernando was just saying, is it allows you to understand, are you working on the driving activities? Are you onboarding and nurturing your customers? It helps you see that, are you doing this or not? And if you're not, and if you do this kind of weekly review with your CSM or monthly review, and you see that most of the time this month you worked on renewals, it means that next quarter renewals are not going to be good, or the next quarter after that, because you are not dealing with the drivers. It also helps you see where are the bottlenecks, where are the things that the company is not, or your portfolio is weak on, and work on improving those things. So it's like any financial investor looks at their portfolio of investment, every VC that have, and makes decisions of where do I prioritize my time, where do I invest my Matt Rosenberg said this yesterday. It's like an investor. Where do I spend my resources in order to maximize the yield? Portfolio allows you to do that, because it's not there's no end state to this process. I mean, the end state of is a very bad end state, right? The customer leaves. So you want to maintain as many customers as possible. So you need to constantly look at the entire customer base. And I think we're out of time, right?
I think we're out of time. We took all of our time. All right. Well, thanks, everyone. It was great writing this book with you. And
thank you, Fernando.
It's available on Amazon, and I think there might be 1 or 2 copies left. So,
yeah. So anyone that didn't have a book yesterday, they're going to be there on the table later today. So just pick up your own copy, and if you need for your boss, just let me know.